Now, with Nadine.
Today, I'm joined by Merril Hoge, former NFL running back, ESPN analyst, best-selling author, cancer survivor, and a man who's never backed down from a challenge. From setting records on the field to overcoming life's toughest battles, Merril gets real about football, fatherhood, and the undeniable grit it takes to keep moving forward. Merril, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nadine. It was an awesome introduction. I hope I can live up to that.
Well, you do live up to it. I mean, so many people hear your name and know exactly who you are. But first, talk to me about that jersey that's right behind you.
Well, you know what? Actually, this is my Bears jersey. The 100th anniversary, the Chicago Bears sent to everybody who's been a part of their organization a framed jersey. You know, the letter back there. There's a 100th anniversary on one side, the letter on the other that tells you a little bit about the history of the Bears and the league. And so being a kid and Walter Payton being my favorite player, it is kind of surreal to have been given something like that from a great organization.
I bet. And I was actually going to ask you, who was your idol growing up?
Walter Payton. Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Well, I want to talk about your life and your legacy, and let's talk about let's start from the beginning. Where exactly did you grow up, Merril?
Pocatello, Idaho. A lot of people may not. As soon as they say Idaho, the first thing out of their mouth is going to be potatoes. And I did work on a farm, and I worked on potatoes and in potatoes, moved pipe in potatoes, harvested potatoes. I was a cowboy. I ranched. I cowboyed too. So one of my first jobs was actually we rode horses and trapped gophers on the weekends, and we were responsible for 5,000 acres. So it's the kind of things that people will be like, that probably doesn't fit in a lot of people's scope or thought process and how they were probably raised, but that's how I grew up. I grew up like that, but I saw football on television when I was 8 years old, and I fell in love with it, and that's what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Did you want to be a cowboy, or did you want to pursue football?
Well, I tried the cowboy route. I will be honest with that, and I was trying to throw a calf one day, and I was like, I couldn't do it, and I'm like, well, I can cowboy anytime. I really can only play football a certain period of time, so I'll come back to the cowboy thing if it's still there later after I try football.
Well, the cowboy spirit probably helped elevate your career and your passion and also your mentality.
Well, I will say this. Cowboys and farmers and ranchers are tough, man. They're just tough people,
They are
man.
tough.
I don't think they get the credit nor respect that they deserve, but they are we may get to this later, but a relentless mindset that I think is such a critical component, can be a great weapon in life to help you through anything or achieve anything. They have that. That's instilled in them. They have to function like that, or things don't happen for them. You know, when it's raining and it's nasty outside, they can't go, it's raining and nasty outside.
You better bet we're going to get to that later.
It does not matter. They move on. And so being a kid and at age 12 and start working that arena, you got to see that. You got to see that, you know, in those professions. And there's just great value in that from a life skill.
Oh, we're gonna touch on everything. But growing up as that kid who, you know, had cowboy in him, you know, ate every kind of potato, and also had big dreams of playing football. You know, I know we're going to talk about Idaho State, but did you start younger than that in high school?
Yeah, I started playing when I was 8 years old. We played for, well, literally, you know, we had sponsors, and our sponsor was McDonald's.
Really?
Now, one of the great, well, good and bad. The sponsor, McDonald's, what they did is every game you won, you got to come after the game, the whole team, and eat for free. Mm-hmm. So our first year, none of us went and ate for free because we didn't. Our coaches bought us our last meal. So it actually ended up being a motivation for us, because the next year we rallied. We're like, man, we are not going all year and having to have our coaches buy our meal at the end of the year. And we went undefeated.
And we wanted a Happy Meal, right?
Yeah, right. We got 11 free Happy Meals.
Yeah. So there was good incentive.
Amen.
There was good incentive.
A Big Mac and a Coke and fries was a big deal for a kid back then.
Totally. And like, I mean, I have three boys, so I have one son, two sons who really enjoy playing football. Right now, when you play football at 8 or 9 or 10 years old, it's like they're drafting for the NFL. Back then, was it a little bit more pure?
Yeah, well, like I said, I coached youth football when my son played. I was involved with USA Football and giving youth football direction in the Heads Up football program. We developed that through USA Football. So I've been passionate and active in helping give direction to youth football and running camps for over a decade, coached it for almost two. And the one thing that I really tried to instill in coaches is that, this experience for these kids needs to be a growing, learning, a fun one. Nobody's going to go to the Super Bowl. Nobody's getting fired. We're not having Monday night games and Sunday night games, and that can be lost not because of the child, but because of parents and coaches. That's where I saw it eroded. Somebody asked me, what the problem with youth sports was, and I said, it's simple. There's three problems: parents, parents, and parents.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Period. And it's a shame. To your point, everybody's going to play in the NFL. Everybody is, going to go to college and in that a particular sport. Now, listen, you want to encourage every kid to get the most out of their skills, develop them the best they can. But just the reality is, not everybody. I mean, very few. I, this statistic kind of puts it in perspective. 0.016% of eligible drafted players get drafted in the NFL, and only 30% of those make it. So then just take that to every state across the United States, and you can cut that, into, a half or even further. So it's very few that get to do that. Now, that's not to discourage anybody from wanting to do that. It's just painting the real picture of what you have to do if you're going to get there. You got to commit to that. You got to commit to it. And I go back to that relentless attitude. You have to have that, and you cannot waver. And that's where a lot of people struggle. When it gets tough, they start wavering.
Right.
And a lot of things can already, even if you don't waver, a lot of things can affect you. Injuries, you get bad coaching. There's a whole host of things that can erode a kid's dream and passion, nothing of their own. So it's why I go back to youth sports is a time of enjoyment and fun. And the more we do that for kids, just the better off that they're going to use that for their life's work.
Right.
And
For the love of the game.
Sports was valuable.
For the love of the game. Okay. So you set 44 school and conference records at Idaho State. And looking back, where did that competitive edge come from? My guess would be the cowboy in you. Am I right?
Well, actually, my work ethic kind of came from that. I look at farm, like I used to get up at 5 a.m. I did this every year, all summer long.
At what age? Bring us back. What age were you getting up?
Age 12. So
age
at
12.
age 12, I got up every morning. Once school started, I went 2 weeks before school got out and 2 weeks to school getting in. Okay, for the first few years. But I got up every morning at 5 o'clock, had to be in the field by no later than 6. I used to get my motorcycle and drive to the farm, pick up a truck, and then drive it out to the Mashad Flats, some 12 miles away, without a driver's license. So I did this for years.
I was just going to ask your motorcycle at 12, but we'll just keep going.
Motorcycle at 12, but I was okay with, and they were okay with me as long as I was working on a farm. Okay?
Right.
Like if I wanted to go to baseball practice on my motorcycle, they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, why is that? Anyway, that being said, so I learned a lot of, that. I mean, I really had like a man's job though when I was a kid. I mean, I didn't know what summers were. I never slept over anywhere. I didn't, go on 4th of July parties. We worked.
You worked.
We worked all the time, and that's all I really knew. But that work ethic helped me, and those skills in the relentless commitment you needed to move on into, particular goals and dreams that I had.
Yeah.
They were sure valuable in that journey.
What do you remember most vividly about draft day 1987?
I think the one thing I probably remember, I remember the most. It's a 3-day draft like it is today. I was supposed to go in the fifth round, by the fifth round, to the Raiders. We're well into the seventh and eighth round, and I became somewhat discouraged. I thought, this is kind of what happens. The reality of this probably not going to happen. My mom had tragically passed away a little over a year ago,
Oh,
and I had like a moment of truth in my life. I actually went into their bedroom. I knelt down on her side of the bed, and I really honestly I just had an honest prayer. I
oh,
just I just prayed for guidance in where I need to go. I'd done my part to be drafted if that was the quest. If I hadn't, I mean, if that doesn't happen, then it's like help me know what I got to go, where I got to go next. And I did that in a genuine, open fashion, and I probably never had greater peace in my life. At a moment where I just got up. I'm like, man, I feel good. It didn't mean I was going to get drafted. That's not what it meant. I was going to be okay,
right.
because I had done my part. I'd done everything. I wasn't on my knees going, boy, I should have worked a little hard. I should have. There's a little more commitment I could have. I had none of that. Like I knew I'd done my part. I'd got everything out of my God-given abilities, and I had peace with that. So I went out and played basketball, and my dad called me and said, "Hey, there's someone on the phone." I'm not
Oh
even
my
thinking.
goodness.
I'm not even thinking even that. I was like, oh, I wonder who it is. I answered the phone, and it was the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that happened within like an hour of everything. And that's still surreal to me in my life. And I think the thing that highlighted that is that we're all responsible for our journey. When you take ownership of your journey and you're accountable for things and you do your part, you can have peace where you end up in life. You should have peace where you because there's nothing more a person can ask of themselves than their very best and to give everything they have. And as long as you do that and you commit to that, man, you should have some of the things that matter in life. That is peace, joy, and happiness.
Your mom was looking after you that day.
You know what, I would say yes to that, but my mom, I would argue at that time. She said, listen, this is like when I was a kid, now this is like 1973, 77. Like some people didn't even have a television back then.
Yeah.
You had three channels back then. Like football isn't like today where there are flat screens everywhere, 300 channels, and you have access to all kinds of sports. I mean, all the time. I saw football occasionally because we didn't have our television on Sundays, so I'd see football on Mondays if I was lucky.
If you were
And
lucky.
I didn't have a lot of access to, what we have today. I just remember the first time I saw it, man, I wanted to do it.
You wanted
I've
to do
never
it.
forgot that. I was like, man, that's what I want to do. And, but what I'm getting at is my mom, she knew very little bit about football. I mean, even after games, when she watched them, she was asking me like, what happened? I mean, when, yeah, she was a little confused by it.
She was a little confused. Well, I mean, that's a beautiful memory of that day.
Yeah.
And it all aligned so lovely for you. First being in that room, playing basketball, having your dad come out and getting that call from the Steelers. And you played 122 consecutive games, the longest streak in the NFL at the time.
Yeah. Nadine, that actually is probably one of my what I'm most proud of at that moment in time. And the reason for that is because actually why I had the record at that time, Dan Marino had blown his Achilles out the year before
Okay.
in Cleveland. And so they go next in line who has the longest active streak, and it was me. And I didn't realize it.
You didn't
I
realize
didn't
it.
realize it. And the reason that I was proud of that is because when a running back plays 122 straight games, like that's hard. Like I mean, and I started, so and I carried the ball, and I mean, you take a pounding, and so to do that it doesn't happen very often. It's extraordinary when it happens, and I was proud of that. I was just proud that I was able to do that because everybody respects it. It doesn't matter who you played for, you just be like, I tip my hat to that guy.
I mean,
And
it's
so,
physical, but it's also mental. The
yes,
toughness.
that's probably, I always tell people like there's three degrees that you have to be really good at to transition from college to the NFL. And number one is will never be beat. It's undefeated. It is the IQ of the game, the intelligent level of all players. I think people get misled to think the quarterback's the smartest guy on the field. And the other 10 guys who step in that huddle, they got to know exactly what he knows.
Yeah,
They
they
got to see
do.
what he sees. They've got to operate and execute and adjust just like he does. Defensively, no different. Smart. I mean, gifted athletes. If you do not have an IQ, that is going to be a massive hurdle for you. You never get over that hurdle. That will
Right.
always hinder your athletic ability and your true skill set. If you have that, then it comes down to quickness next. Because really in football, everything, no matter who we're talking about, no matter what position, it's about the ability to start, stop, redirect almost the beginning of every play. And then overall speed, yes, if you have that eliteness, then that you have the complete package. But
Yeah.
speed is actually third. The other two would trump speed as far as transitioning successful to the NFL.
I mean, there's so much of your story we're going to walk through. I was going to ask one question, but I'm going to ask this one first. Your retirement was forced by the improper handling of head trauma.
You know what? I do these quite a bit, and that is always misunderstood. You're the
Okay.
first person to say it right.
Oh, I did. Okay. So tell me why I
Okay.
said it right and please explain.
Okay. Well, people will say the concussion ended my career, and that's not true. If that was the case, I would never played after the Monday night game when I did have a severe head trauma. What happened from my severe head trauma, and keep in mind, I never lost consciousness. I try to educate people in the process of this. So losing consciousness is not a sign of severity. It is just a sign that you've had head trauma. And the best way to explain that is because once you regain consciousness, well, losing consciousness is not an issue anymore. You've regained consciousness. Now only two things matter: cognitive recall. And so there's a lot in that. Cognitive recall is, how do you cognitively function? Okay. And stability. How do you move? All of those things have to be weighed in and evaluated on. And it's a arduous process. That's why we have subjective and objective tools, a variety of things to look at. Even eyes are a key factor in vision. In looking at, since this right here operates everything, you need to check out everything and make sure that everything is working. That being said, even in 1994, what I'm going to say next is archaic. This had never been done back then. The guy who, now keep in mind, this happens in a Monday night game in Kansas City in a preseason game.
Mm-hmm.
When I lose, when I have the trauma, I leave the field and they're evaluating me, but I'm not responding. I'm not talking. Well, I'm responding, but I'm saying, like, they asked me where I was, and I was like, I'm in Tampa. And they're like, how do you know that? I go, because I can hear the ocean. Okay,
Oh,
so that response right there
said enough.
ain't. They take me into the locker, then they take me to the hospital to do scans to make sure I don't have any bleeding before they put me on a plane for us to go home. So they're doing some safety and precaution stuff there. Several hours later, I still am not remembering what happened. I'm not even remembering that you came up to me 5 minutes ago. So my cognitive recall is atrocious. And this is several hours later. Okay,
Hmm.
so that's another sign of severity. When you can't do those type of things, as time goes on. I get home in Chicago. I'm not much better. So I come down to the training room the next morning. They had a car bring me in, and I still was bad. I wasn't functioning well. I was struggling. One day later, no, excuse me, 5 days later, the doctor who had saw me and took care of me in Kansas City with the Bears called me on the phone. I was in the training room, and he asked me how I felt. Now, I still had a headache at the time. Now, keep in mind, this is in 1994. Players weren't told even given any symptoms to look for.
Huh.
Like today, a lot of stuff, a lot of this, the way we get better at it is the best person when you have head trauma is the person who had it, because they're the only one that know you have a headache. They're the one that, boy, I'm just not as sharp as they can give you all these things they're going through. That was not the case in 1994. But he asked me how I felt, and I said, I feel fine. And he cleared me to play. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Oh
he only
my.
asked me one question, and he cleared me to play. Now, in 1994, that's even archaic. From somebody who was evaluated all the way home, and the records that they kept too. They kept great records of just how bad I was and their concern. But 5 days later, they cleared me over the phone to go back in and play. I do that.
You did that.
About a month later, I sustained another type of hit. This time they take me off the field. They're fixing my face mask because that had been bent. I had cut up my chin. They're fixing that up. And that's when I wasn't responding. They took me to the locker room. And this is where a lot of people don't know what happened because I left the field. So I left the vision of people. is I went into cardiac arrest.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so they rushed me to intensive care. I mean, rushed me to the hospital. I stayed in intensive care for several days. I finally recovered enough to go home, but the journey of recovery, I had to learn how to read again.
Oh my
I went
gosh.
through severe depression. I mean, I was a mess. I was a human mess. And at that time, they didn't have all the rehab that exists today. I feel like I got lucky in the sense of I transitioned to an area or an arena that was challenging to me and it was different. And that helped my cognitive skills. I stayed active. That was another physical component of moving that helped me kind of rehab myself back to normal. But that took about 2 years.
2 years. And
Maybe like
even
two.
then,
So,
in 1994, as a professional football player, you're supposed to have the trust and confidence in the should be the best doctors in the world giving you advice on what you can or cannot do.
well, that's true. Now, here's what was not taking place at that time. Only the Steelers had a neurological doctor, a brain neural doctor. Okay, the doctor who saw me was a family practitioner. Okay, that they're not an expert
No,
in that. And the Steelers were the only one at the time. The Bears did not have that. Now, a lot of people want me to, keep like throwing mud at the Bears. And listen, I was angry at the Bears. I was angry at the doctor because it didn't just end
sure.
my career, it really cost me my life.
It costs your life.
Um, but if I sat in that arena forever, well, nothing's going to get better from it. What we tried to do and what the Bears did from it, in all fairness, is they learned from it. They made cognitive testing mandatory that next year, and they hired a doctor that was an expert in that field to handle that injury better. So mistakes, man. And you know what? You don't know what you don't know.
You
You
don't
know,
want
even
you
though the
don't know.
Steelers were proactive, a lot of other teams were reluctant to do what the Steelers were doing at that time. And this injury helped that. It changed the league. It changed how the advancement of protocols to better care and the proper things to do to help the player in not returning too quickly.
Yeah, I mean, looking back then in 1994, and I know we're skipping around a little because now I'm looking into the present. How have you seen the culture shift or the protecting the players? Are you satisfied having gone through what you've been through with how the players are now treated?
Well, us just tell you this. The real problem still falls under the umbrella of care. Okay, there's a lot
Care.
of things that fall under care. When you think of the tools that are accessible today and that we can implement, man, if implemented correctly, and I say correctly because see, now you got human beings working here. Sometimes the tool isn't implemented correctly. There's not a proper evaluation, so mistakes are made. Now, should there be less and less mistakes? Yes, and there are less and less mistakes. I tell parents all the time, in the history of sports, if there was ever a time that you would want your kids to play, it would be right now. It is the safest it's ever been, as long as all of these things are implemented properly. Okay,
Correctly.
a baseline test, education and information to the player and what they're responsible for, going back to like when I did this, I actually was the first coach in youth history to have a protocol in 2003 for youth sports.
Wow.
Now, what I told my kids is that you're responsible. Like if you take a hit and you got a headache or vision's bad, or you have something you don't feel right about, you got to tell me. Okay. And we established this really, really early when these were kids. The kids are willing to do that. They would tell they're not scared of that. But my job was to watch for the one thing and the only thing you really can tell. Like a hard collision does not tell you if somebody had head trauma.
Yeah.
You can guess and you can pull people off. But I always thought that was ridiculous too, because there's collisions that I had that I would tell you, what do you think about that collision? I guarantee you would go, that's nothing. That looks like a very mundane hit. And I'd be going back to the huddle going, oh my gosh. Then I'd have a hit that you would think nothing of. And or I'd have a collision that, looked like, oh my gosh, got to pull them out. That was nothing. So my,
Yeah.
my, my point, the stability of a kid. So if a kid gets up and wobbles, that's the only thing I could really visually tell. And that did happen a couple of times when I coached for like 10 years through my son's young career. But I removed that player right away. Our job is to remove him and not let him to return. That was a big hurdle and a big issue that we had is people were trying to return them during the game. And I'm like, that's a big mistake. If you already have a symptom, something happened, get them out, keep them out. So we've done so much better from that. So if you follow all of the protocols and you execute them properly, and then you get the proper recovery, the proper recovery tools, and you go to the proper rehab, and then the proper evaluation to return, man, if you follow that, execute that, you're gonna do one of two things. You're gonna return back in a much safer environment because you're gonna be fully recovered, or you're not gonna return because you've not recovered.
Right. Right.
And right there, that's good for everybody involved. So, but people make mistakes in the process. They skip something here, they skip something there, and mistakes are made. So the umbrella of care, everything falls under. It's not having head trauma. I mean, shoot, the leading cause of head trauma in this entire country is tripping and falling. The most dangerous environment is your home. We're never stopping that
Yeah.
unless you don't want to live at home, get in the shower, walk down the stairs, play in the backyard.
Yeah.
So instead of living in fear, be educated and informed
Be
about it
educated.
and know how to handle it and care for it and get the right tools implemented for not just kids. I mean, this happens to every age group,
Every age group. And I want to go
Yeah.
back to talking about your journey, but I do have a quick question. A lot of youth sports that, especially in football, they start out with flag. When are you comfortable putting kids in pads? At what age?
The second that they want to, I mean, I was on the USA board for this, and we discussed this and debated. I'm like, listen, I know my son was ready to play at age 7. He played at age 7.
Yeah.
Um, if you put an age group in there, and this goes back to the kid, do they want to do it? Are they passionate about it? Age 7, my son started. I mean, in that arena, I don't think, people will go, well, they're so young and they're so, okay, wait a minute, time out. Okay. When you look at a lot of things that are important about head trauma, okay, those kids with equipment that exists today, it's as good as the
It's
National
great
Football
equipment.
League
It's
and
great
in college.
equipment.
Okay. The equipment is as good at all levels. It has to be. It's a standard. Okay. So that's not made up. That is a standard. Okay. You don't have enough energy with these young kids to oftentimes a collision. Actually, where head trauma usually comes from is tripping and falling and hitting their head on the ground. That's
Yeah.
probably, from about ages 8 to 12. It's not till they hit puberty that they really start popping pads, because now they've gotten bigger, stronger,
Yeah.
and certain collisions are more severe. Now, is your kid at that age running the risk of affecting their overall brain development and health? There's less chance of that because of the lack of force and energy that exists. Where it would be a concern would be the age group that actually people say it's okay to start playing in. And
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. That's the concerning age.
And then let me caution you on one
Yeah.
other area. 12 to 18,
Yep.
the most
High
important
school.
aspect of our brain,
Growing.
the amygdala area right here of emotions and
Yeah.
thought, all the things that go on with development, is being developed at that time.
At that time.
The brain is not fully developed till age 25. So if you want to really say, oh, science and medicine, we don't want anybody to be playing football and this is so dangerous based on the development of the brain, they shouldn't play till 25.
Yeah,
If you knew what
we
you're
all know
talking
that's
about.
not going to happen. That can't, because all these
Exactly.
guys are so young. Okay, so I want to get back to your story, because you were forced into retirement because of what happened to you. You are this 8-year-old at heart who had big dreams of playing football. You go to Idaho State. You're playing for the Steelers. You're breaking records. This stuff happens with the doctor, and now you're down. And did you suffer? Did you have depression? I mean, you said you had to learn to read again.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is when I get to speak throughout the country, I have the message I share, find a way. And find a way is about really what's possible for people, and the challenge of taking ownership of your journey. And this is probably where, even though I had done it in my life earlier, I had done it in an arena of, I set a goal, I have a dream, and I'm going for it. Okay. I never had to do it in a darkness where I was literally in a bad space. Every day I would get up, I'd lay on the couch, and I would do these 3 things: point fingers, cast blame, and make excuses. Every day. I was good at that. I was really good at it. And I realized one day, as I pointed fingers, I casted blame, and I made excuses, nothing was changing in my life. Nothing. And it's another time where these words honestly would inspire me to take action and do something about my circumstance. One day I was taking the inventory, pointing fingers, cast blame, making excuses, mad at the Bears, mad at the league. How could they do this? How could they make this mistake? Now my career is over and I'm age 30 and I got to start over.
You were age
I got a litany
30.
of reasons and excuses
Age
to
30.
do this each and every day. And then I realized nobody's coming here and getting you off that couch. You get yourself off the couch. And that is where I found probably the first time my life really that I found ownership. Okay, I hadn't done this to myself. I got every reason to be angry. I mean, I'd win it in court,
Right.
but that's not going to get me out of this mess. I got to get me out of that mess. And once I did that, once I made a commitment to get off the couch and start being proactive and start doing some things, returning calls that had been reached out to me, and people had wanted to help me too, by the way, which I'm not saying I did this all by myself, did
Right.
not.
You had a support.
But I did make the first step, which is so important in so many scenarios. You got to make the first one. You make the first one, and I guarantee you there's a lot of resources and things that could help you. People that want to help you, but they're not going to do it for you. That's why you have to always look in the mirror and make a commitment in the mirror and start with the man in the mirror, the person in the mirror.
I feel like you
And
found that inner cowboy that always lived in you.
well, you know, Nadine, that's a good point because I don't think that ever died in
It
me,
ever
and I
did.
don't think
Right.
it did in me. But it was a great lesson. I didn't realize it at the time, but now as I reflect back, God, that was like a critical component of the journey,
Of your
and
journey.
that's why when I share the message, just if people can realize that whether it's you who made the mistake, and impact your life, or how you were raised, or what somebody did to you, okay, you can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
All you can do is how you handle it, how you respond to it, not react to it, because there's a big difference there. Reaction is usually about true emotions. We get angry, we get upset, whatever it is. Responding is having a plan, thinking through it, going, how am I going to move forward? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I know what they are going to do. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And if it comes back to that, man, you practice that habit, you develop that habit, powerful tool. It helps
It's a
you move
powerful
out of
tool.
things and move on, keeps the trash behind you, and you're focused on what you control. And man, life is a lot better and easier when you do it that way.
Yeah. And you've been involved with ESPN as an analyst. You went back with the Steelers to do some scouting. You've almost, and before we get into your book, and your journey really did continue with challenges. But as far as your professional career, you've still found a way to stay immersed in the sport that you love.
Well, Nadine, I always give ESPN, I'm grateful for them because I talked about that cognitive spot I was in. Them hiring me, actually, the Steelers also hired me. Mr. Rooney gave me my first job in broadcasting because I was the first player to ever be in the booth for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Really?
Yeah, so now most people don't know that because they
Yeah,
didn't
I
let me
didn't
talk. So I just would
know.
watch the game and I would comment occasionally for the first couple of years, but I helped launch ESPN2, college
Okay.
football. And what that did for me is I now had to work cognitively in an arena that I was unfamiliar for. And that was a challenge for me because of the cognitive trauma that I had been.
Right. Your brain was
If
now
you
getting
looked at how they
exercised.
rehab people today, it's actually really similar. When somebody has some type of head trauma, about 99%, unless there's tissue damage and bone structure and bleeding, about 99% of it can be recovered and repaired from. You get the right rehab and training properly. And a lot of this, because I watched my son go through this when he played quarterback at BYU. When I took him into a treatment and saw what they did. So it's cognitively, they're challenging the brain, they're working on the brain, they're trying to develop it and make it better, along with movement, not just getting on a bike stationary, the actual movement of the body, all these different levels of movement. You do that combination, man, you can recover and repair so much faster. And
Yeah.
you're finally healthy so you can return to whatever environment or get back to just normal life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, your story is just fascinating, but your story didn't end. You also had cancer.
Yeah.
And when was that? And what kind of cancer?
Well, it's actually 22 years ago. I was 38 years old.
38. So at 30 your career ends.
Yeah.
You have a road to recovery, you recover, and then at 38 this happens.
Yeah, and if there was ever something I ever thought, I'm honest with this, I read a book almost a month to my diagnosis, and I remember the person that it was a guy who had cancer, and he talked about his journey. He'd recovered from it, he survived it, blah. I remember folding the book up, going, man, I never have to worry about that. Based on my lifestyle, my history, genetic history, I'm like, I thank the Lord because I could not handle that. That is beyond my abilities. That's exactly how I thought of it. I remember, so when I was told I had a 3-pound tumor in my lower back, my doctor said, you're going to go through, it could be up to 2 years of just brutal chemotherapy. We're going to give you, we'll do one every 3 weeks. It's going to be like being run over by a Mack truck. We'll give you 21 days of recovery. If you do, we're going to do it again and again and again. It's taking a toll on you. Anywhere from 14 to 17 days after the first treatment, you'll start losing your hair. So you might want to think about shaving your head. Anyhow, and then he said, and the last thing is the hardest thing, but I can't guarantee what we're going to do is going to work. And he hangs the phone up. I'd never heard that. Two things overcame me, if not overwhelmed me: chemotherapy and dying. And I've been in some dark spaces. I told you about the end of my career. This one was as dark or darker than anything because there was a conclusion to it
There was a
that I
conclusion.
didn't have in the other one. And I did exactly what I thought I'd do. I
What'd you
mean, I
do?
folded up like a tent, and I was like, I am done. I am done. And the one thing that I love doing or being more than when I played in the NFL or my career at ESPN and even speaking, I love speaking. I'm so
Yeah.
passionate about it. Guys, I love being a dad. Honestly, I love my kids without end. Find a way has been a parenting tool that I've used with my kids. What has made that work is we communicate, and I've learned more by listening than I've learned by talking. But in this case, I'm like, man, my kids are not used to me being sick, bald, and laying on a couch. I better get ahead of it. I shared with them what the doctor shared with me, and I went right back to that darkness of chemotherapy and dying. I was overwhelmed by it. And my daughter actually works across the room. I didn't even realize I was so consumed in chemotherapy and dying. And she crawled up in my lap and she put her little dainty arms around my neck and she finally gets my attention. So I looked at her and she says, you know what, Dad, you better find a way.
Oh,
I'm telling you, I have to I relive when I speak because I get to that moment. I can still exercise the emotions of that day.
it was her
She
who said it.
changed everything.
It was
She
her
changed,
who
like
said it.
my little 9-year old, to have the wisdom to do that and to challenge me was the perfect person. And then those words again would inspire me to do something about my circumstances.
And so it was your 9-year-old that said the words that you live by, the shirt that you're
Yeah,
wearing today. It
yeah,
it was that moment that changed everything for you.
yep. Because let me tell you this, chemotherapy and dying, you could not change that. Nothing would have been able to change that but that.
How
But
many
a
kids
nine,
do you have?
two.
You have two.
My daughter was 9 at the time, and my son was 7. And
9 and 7.
now I don't often say this part but it was really good. It actually made it perfect because she gave me the challenge, and then my son Bo at 7, he goes, "Hey, now can we go to Walmart?" And I'm like, I'm like, we all started laughing. I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I need that too. I need this
Yeah.
balance. I need this balance of, hey, this is serious. We're going to create a
Yeah.
plan. We're going to go at it, but let's laugh on the way.
Right.
Okay, we're still alive. So, because Bo's 7, Bo doesn't know. Bo's just like, this is enough. I want he has no idea what's going
Yeah,
on.
but you look like the kind of guy, and I'm sure that your kids look at you like, hey, dad's fierce. Like dad's gonna be fine. Like I think they probably just looked at you knowing and believing the kind of person that you are. And they can see that even at 9 and 7. Kids are wise beyond their years sometimes.
Nadine, that's a really good perspective, and I say that for this reason. What I have learned about, okay, leadership, we kind of hinted on this a little bit. Like everybody's a leader, in some way, because you're the leader of your life. Okay, you're in charge of that. You are the leader. You're in charge. You are the chief. Um, there's a lot of important tools in leadership, but this one might be the most important, and that is modeling. Like what people see you do is going to outweigh what they hear you say, especially if they don't align. Now, if they align, then you got something really powerful. But it is true. You could get up and pontificate and give the greatest message and presentation in the history of mankind, walk off the stage and do the complete opposite of what you said. This is true. Everybody will do what they saw, not what they heard. So giving that, what you just mentioned, there's oftentimes, and this happened unsolicited. My kids, they like to get together for my birthday. And one of the first times we did this, they were revisiting things that impacted them as kids. Everything that they referred to was what they saw, not what they heard.
Interesting.
It was like, oh my, I mean, I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
And they gave me example after example too. And I was like, wow, I was that, even though I kind of knew it, I didn't know the true impact of it, but the value. And that's why parenting, you can sit there and say, hey, don't do this, don't do that. But if you're not doing that and you're doing the opposite, they're going to do what they see.
Yeah.
Your
Do
words
what
are going
they
to
see.
fall on deaf ears. What they see is powerful. It's true in the world of leadership, no matter what arena it is. How you model matters.
How you model matters. I mean, that's something that's going to stay with me as a parent too. You, the list goes on. You also had open heart surgery, to which most people would take some time to recover. You were back to work in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So are you just like not inhuman? Like, are you superpower? Like, is it all attitude? Is it mind over matter? What is your secret?
Well, I will tell you this, and what caused that open heart surgery. People ask me this quite a bit. It's hard to explain. So I'll give you a quick story. Before I go get chemotherapy, I have like 10 days of testing.
Right.
And I'm like, it was like the last day of testing. I'm going in to get an echocardio, look at my heart. And, I tell you, I was in that darkness. And so I hadn't really gathered what I'd been doing the last 7, 8 days because I was just so caught up in that chemotherapy and dying cloud. And so I was like, oh my gosh, these people have made a mistake. It's like, they surgery on the left shoulder, but they do it on the right. I'm like, the nurse comes out. I go, you know what? There's no mistake here. I go, I'm not having heart surgery. I go, I don't have a problem with my heart. She goes, oh, I know. She goes, you have to do this test because we got to see if your heart can withstand what you're about to go through.
Oh my.
Exactly. I'm like, honestly, it was like a standing 8 count. I was like, oh my gosh. I don't even understand all of that, to be honest with you. Okay. It doesn't sound good, obviously. 6 years after my last treatment, which was almost a year, and one of the treatments, it was a 12-hour treatment. Part of the treatment was called Red Death. And that just tells you, and I've never felt anything violate or scream through my veins quicker than on the day that was administered. And it was administered every time. It was foul and it was violent. That being said, 6 months later, after my last pet cat, if I don't have any reoccurrence, I'm going to be considered cancer-free. Doctor calls me up, Stan Marks. He says, hey, good news. And when he said good news, I was like, why does that not sound like the only thing he's going to say?
Yeah.
He says, you're cancer-free. There's no more reoccurrence, Merril. You're good. He goes, but I'm like, gosh dang it. There's always a but.
Why is there a but?
Come on. He goes, your aorta is a little enlarged. I'm like, my aorta? I'm like, I don't know what the aorta is. I'm like, what's that? And he goes, that's your muscle of your heart. I'm like, well, of course it's bigger. I've been training my whole life. I'm like,
right.
in my way, I was like, bah, this is stupid. So, as I found out, that is a little bit of a concern. I'm going to fast forward through the whole thing. That chemotherapy that I did, that Red Death, it can weaken tissue. So it weakened my aorta. There was a bubble in it. So I had to have open heart surgery to have it recovered. So I took a toll just by the treatment. Go back to why that lady said to me, oh, I got to make sure you can withstand it. She goes, I just told somebody your same age 6 months ago, they couldn't do treatment. So think about that. So the reason I set that up is if you say, hey, what's your number one passion in your life? What was the first one? And I'm going to tell you health and fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was 8 years old, I saw Superman, Batman. I saw him in a magazine. I'm like, God, how do they get those bodies? And I became fascinated with that.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get muscles like that? How do you do that? So, and this is way back before the amino acids were out. Like if you had a universal set in your gym, like you had the greatest gym of all time. So we've advanced drastically from 1973. Okay. So, but at that time, I never lost that passion. And I've always looked at overall health does you just lose your health or does it erode over time? Can you be a part of that. Anyway, so my whole life journey has been investing in it, a lifestyle in it. And it has saved my life so
It
many
has
times.
saved your life so many
It saved
times.
it. And when you said about that 2 weeks, they they told me I would be out for 6. I probably wouldn't be allowed to get back to work for 2 months. I flew to Canada 10 days later after my open heart surgery. I never told my surgeon. I went to New York and finished an appearance I did, and then I was back in the studio 2 weeks later. And actually, this is actually the truth. I came out of the hospital on a Friday. We tape our matchup show on Friday. Had I been in Philadelphia, or New Jersey, where NFL Films is
Hmm.
versus Pittsburgh, I could have done the show that day.
You could have done it.
I could have done the show that day. I would have done the show that day had I been there.
I just think that's the kind of person that you are. And then you've also written a book. Can you tell me about your book?
Well, we'll find a way. I got challenged actually to write this book sitting in a chemotherapy chair on one of my most brutal days of treatment, to be honest with you. A good
Yeah.
friend of mine, we all need people in our lives. I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm a product of a lot of people. People challenge me, people inspire me. I find hope in people. And Charlie LaValle was just a guy who saw things differently. And I'm so grateful that he sees things and has initiatives I don't, or I might not have had. And I've learned from him and I'm grateful for him. But he hires a film crew. He sits with me all day. It's 12 hours
Wow.
that we do this treatment. And it's taken forever because it's my last treatment. And it's not going well. And this is when I shared with him about Find a Way, like how Find a Way had been. I started I put it on my door wall at age 12. And from there on, it has taken me on a journey and it's done so many things for me. And he's like, oh, he didn't know about that. And keep in mind, this documentary we're doing, I'm thinking I'm doing the video because we're talking about my kids and all of these things. We're thinking proactive. If I don't survive, we have this history,
We have this history. It's
stuff we've talked
documented.
about.
Yeah.
I said, hey, he goes, you need to write a book.
Yeah.
I said, Charlie, I remember saying, I go, if I survive, I'll write your dumb book. And then that's the last thing I ever thought of it. I was like, gosh, I mean, because surviving was way
Right.
more important than writing a book.
Right.
And a year later, he calls me up. He said, remember that promise?
Yeah. I'm holding you
I was
to
like,
it.
but I was like, what promise? I don't remember no promise.
Sure.
He was, maybe you said you'd write that book. I was like, oh, I did. Okay, he doesn't do that. I said, I don't write the book. It's too hard to write a book. Look, I'm a C student. I spelled because wrong 96 times in my this last paper I wrote my senior year. Becouse.
You'll never forget that.
Never.
Right.
I was like, so me writing a book? Are you nuts? I'm like, this is so anyway. It takes me. There's a find a way journey in this. I end up writing the book Find a Way. I found a ghostwriter that understood the message. Okay, it was not about football. It was not about statistics. It was about this journey and all the things that had been learned and are applicable to everybody and what's possible for people. And when he understood that, I was like, okay, I got the right guy. So I wrote that. I then learned, I was speaking at an event and a professor came up to me and she said, hey, did you have your open heart surgery in there? And I was like, no, that happened after. She goes, well, you need to republish that and add it in
Add
there.
it
I'm like,
in.
I go, you can do that? Like, I
Yeah.
didn't even know that. I'm like, I'll call my publisher and I go, hey, can you do that? He goes, oh, yeah. So I republished it 3 times to add certain things on the journey. And so
That's
I'm
special.
glad I did. I'm glad I had somebody so much smarter and wiser and better than me to challenge me to get me to do that.
And what is Find a Way now? What is it now?
So it is, I tell people it's helped me live a dream and fight to live in a lot of in between, but it is really about what is possible for people, especially when they look at their life as taking ownership of their journey versus casting blame and making excuses and pointing fingers, because people that do that, you make their day easy, but you make your tomorrow harder. At some point, you have to take ownership of the journey, regardless of how you were raised, what may have happened to you, what you may have done wrong. Man, you got to break those chains and end cycles and push the trash behind you. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easier than running from it the rest of your life. And when you can take ownership up to that and you move forward, man, there's great peace to be brought from there. And you become a better person. You become better in your profession and your craft. And that's what it's about. That's what really Find a Way is about.
That's awesome. And you carry that message with you so many places. You're active on social, you're active broadcasts, you're active with events and speaking. I do want to ask you a few questions about, your personal life a little. How long have you been married?
Listen, Angela and I want to say it's gosh, going on 7 or 8 years
7 or 8
now.
years.
I she is like she's Italian, so I always throw Italian in there because
Because she makes good food.
I've never met anybody. I'm Italian. When you hear Italians scream and yell at you,
Yeah,
they do, and they
I'm thinking about pasta.
she does that too.
Yeah,
She can cook. And here's the biggest compliment I could ever give her. I love her for how much she loves us.
yeah,
Now I say us, you know, my two kids are not her kids,
right.
but my kids love her and adore her. And she's added more to their life in things in ways I could never have or would never
Sure.
have thought of. The way she has been a grandparent to all of our grandkids. We have five. And just the love she gives all of us, what she has brought to balance us and complete us. And she didn't walk in here, when you bring two families together. Now, she never had kids, but that's still a hard arena to
It
step
is
into.
still hard. Yeah.
It is, I'm telling you, well, I didn't do it, and I never really thought that much about it. But when I watched how she operated and handled my kids, Bo lived with us at the time. My daughter was in college, and Bo asked to get to the fridge one day. I asked to get something out of the fridge. And Angela was like, "What?" He goes, "Can I get?" He goes, she goes, "Time out. Come here. Sit down. This is your home.
Oh,
Don't you ever feel like you got to ask me for anything." I actually cried thinking about it because
you'll
my
remember that
son
too.
is, they love her. They just love her. I mean, I've always said, you need to write a book because it's so hard for people to get, when they bring two families together, is understanding that, that you're not their mom.
Right. But
How
you're
can you
still a
be there
person.
for
You're
them?
still important.
Yeah.
You still
But
matter.
and shoot, it wasn't within a year. I'm like, I'd be talking to her. She goes, "Oh, I got to get up to school. Bo left. I go, "What? He called you?" I'm like, I go, "Hey," I call him up. I go, "I'm your dad, right? You can call me too." I'm like, "I am, man."
That's sweet. Do you play football with your grandchildren?
Yes, I play everything with my
I
grandkids.
bet you do. I
Yeah,
bet you're a great
they're not the
grandfather.
most athletic group on the planet, but they're smart. They're cerebral. What they do like to play, I will play with them. We go bowling. We go to Top Golf. We do all the activities that you can do to have fun together, what we can do together.
And you lived in Arizona for a little bit.
I did. I'm telling you, it was one of my favorite places. Ironically, Angela, my wife, worked at the hospital, Scottsdale. Is it Scottsdale Hospital?
Honor
That's where
Health
Bo was born. So that's where
or
Bo, my son, was
or Bo.
born.
Okay.
Bo was born there. Angela worked there at the time, but I'd never met Angela. I don't meet
Oh, that's
Angela.
so ironic.
I know.
That's
And
so
then
funny.
Corey, my daughter, was born in Pittsburgh at Allegheny General, and
Okay.
she worked there at the time too. But we never
Wow.
crossed paths. I know
That's
it's
so
it's kind of
weird.
interesting, but
Almost
we love.
serendipitous, but
We
you
lived.
loved Arizona.
Yeah, she lived in Arizona too. We loved Arizona.
And
I
you and
mean,
you still visit.
yes. I honestly, we trying to move. We're actually still trying to move back there. I thought Cave Creek was way too far out, right?
Mhm.
I was thinking, man, that's way out there. I'm like, it might not be too far now. I mean,
It's
based
the
on the
cowboy in
long.
you. That's the cowboy. That's the cowboy.
Exactly. So I love it out there. I love the weather. I love the West. I think it's from scenery and stuff. It is, it is just
It
gorgeous.
is.
It is
Okay,
a beautiful
who
place to live.
is your team that you're cheering for all the time? I'm
You know
guessing,
what?
but you answer.
Well, when I was a kid, honestly, I was a Pittsburgh Steeler fan
Yep.
as a kid, and I am still a Pittsburgh Steeler fan. I just helped host this event that Mel Blount, who is one of the greatest defensive backs in NFL history, changed the game because he made him make new rules because he was so good. Um, and Terry Bradshaw and I hosted it together.
Mm-hmm.
Of all of the play, I mean, when I got in the league, Mike Webster was my roommate. Donnie Shell locker next to me. I had Franco Harris's locker. I got to know Franco and Rocky, became good friends. Lynn Swan helped me out of my transition at the end of my career. John Stallworth I played with. Joe Green was our defensive line coach. But I'd never met Terry Bradshaw. Of
Wow.
all the players, I'd worked and done some with every one of them until just here like 4 days ago. And he was as much fun. Like there's one one of my teammates, Bubby Brister, who is a special guy. He's one of the greatest teammates in the history. And I'm like, nobody will ever be like Bubby Brister. And man, I found his twin, like Terry Bradshaw. He's just because the first thing he goes, Merril or Merle, what is it? Because Bubby was like,
Yeah.
because they're from the South, so they can't say it. And I'm like, just you're in the right ballpark. Forget it. Don't worry about it. No, is it Merril or Merle? I'm like, I gotta love you already, Terry. I
Right.
love
It
you.
was instant. It was instant. Okay, heading
Yeah.
into this season this fall, I know you're excited for the Steelers, but are there any players from any team you're excited to watch? What are you anticipating? How has the culture shifted for modern football? Like what kind of insights from someone who was a part of the best time in football that's helped us grow and evolve? What is your insight heading into this season?
Well, the one thing I always try to tell people, people always, here's what they want to know. Everybody wants to know who's going to win the Super Bowl. Okay, so
Yeah.
that tells you how important, winning is.
So you're telling me it's not going to be the Lions.
Okay, and here's what I will tell them. The best team wins the Super Bowl
The best
every year.
team. Well,
And
sometimes
not the
it's
best quarterback, not the
right,
best
right.
defense. Because and all year you'll hear, oh, they got the best defense in football. Well, no defense has ever played 60
Yeah.
minutes ever.
Okay,
No
so who's the
quarterback.
best team? What are you thinking?
Well, I can't tell you who the best team is right now because so many things change.
So
You
many
lose
things
bits and
change.
pieces to your team. But I would never close the door on Detroit. I don't think the Lions are anywhere from finished. They have great principles across the board. Losing coordinators is not easy. I'm not going to suggest that.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can grow and evolve, become better in
Yeah.
that. Now, there's times that you don't. I get that too. But
Right.
I just think that their leader is in place,
Yeah.
and that helps them navigate through that. Will Kansas City be good again? Sure, they will.
We're over it. Come on. We don't need another one from them.
Listen, Philadelphia, they lost a lot of
Yeah.
depth, but they still have a ton of good football players.
Yeah.
They could they got their runner is still there. Saquon Barkley, he's not going anywhere. Baltimore, teams that can run the football. But what people I think are misunderstood about our league, there's the two most important aspects to win consistently in the NFL, and this is true over 100 years. This is absolutely true. You have to control the tempo, and you got to win the turnover battle. If you
Yeah.
do that, there's about a 90% chance you can win every Sunday.
Sure.
But doing those two things are not necessarily easy, and they're not guaranteed. But the teams that focus on them and make them a priority have the better chance to win. Like if you take a team that we'd rather throw the football and chuck it around. Case in point, Cincinnati.
Right.
Best quarterback in football is Joe Burrow. They didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
You have to have different complements and different phases and control the tempo in some manner to win consistently. And I look for that early on, like the first 5 weeks of the season. Once I have that kind of figured out, then I can give you who are the front runners getting into the Super Bowl.
Based on last season and even whatever you predict heading onto this season, if you were to choose 5 guys to put on your fantasy football team, who would they be?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, you can't go along with Saquon or Joe Burrow.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Patrick Mahomes is always going to be a guy that's going to put numbers up. Calling the offseason, my brain's going just absolutely empty right now. Trying to think of King Henry. I mean, he's going to be, he ain't going anywhere. Lamar Jackson, guys that are going to score points, obviously are critical and are going to get the ball a lot. Those guys, there's 4 guys. Who would be my 5th? I mean, I can't even think of how many teams there are on the NFL right now. That's how empty I am right now. I'm like, that's no surprise to anybody, those 4 guys.
Yeah.
But I don't think that
You'll circle back. You'll text me later.
yes,
Text me your 5th pick.
and then we can update this thing.
Yeah, we'll keep updating. What does victory mean to you?
Well, I think it's the process and how you got there. This is going to go all the way back to youth football. Is winning important? I don't think there's any question it is, but it's not the most important thing. How does one go about winning? How does one go about getting victory? Okay. What are the proper principles that you put in place? That's what I talk about, like in youth football. Go, okay, listen, I understand winning is important. I mean, we all want to win, but why don't we teach them how you win in life? Okay. Be prepared. Okay. Being prepared applies to anything as we move on in life. Being responsible and accountable for being prepared when we go into a game. That could be the most important aspect or tool that we teach anybody, to have that responsibility, to get better, to practice. That's why we practice. That's why we do the things we're doing. If we teach that, then we become victorious one day. We win one day. What I've always thought, and this is when I did it at youth football, but I've coached every level, is it's like, listen, I have a philosophy that when we win, all right, it is about the team. It is about everybody that contributed something. If we were to lose, it is all about you. If you stay in that arena, you will always get better and grow from the process. But the process is what I think needs to be a priority. The result will be this if we do this.
Yeah, you answered the question that I ask a lot of pro athletes because, having a mom of boys, it's how do you navigate a loss? And to you, you just answered it. It's the process. It's the process, and it's all
And you revisit it. You
you
revisit
revisit
to your
it.
kids, listen, I think you win and learn. It's like if that's how I looked at it. I try to teach my kids, we win or we learn. And we even learn when we win, but when we lose, let's what can we do to get better? How do we get
Yeah.
better? What do you do to get better? What could you have done better? How do we prepare better? What do we need to do in practice to make that preparation better? See, like if you teach those things, well, then you have tools that you put in your tool belt of life. You get into business, you get
Yeah.
into a job, things don't go right, didn't have that. What do? You revisit what you need to do better. What is the process I need to do to get better? What is my preparation and my practices to help me?
Well, if you move back to Arizona, I would like you to be my life coach and I would like you to be my kids coach. Could you do
How old
both?
are your kids? How old are your kids?
11, 9, and 7. 11, 10, and 7. All
Oh my
boys.
gosh. You
Yeah.
talk about reflection, man. I love those years.
They're
I
great
love
years. They're pure years where they just, no matter, it's either a football, a baseball, a basketball, a soccer ball. It's just, we wake up every morning to the ball being thrown against it's wall ball inside my house 24/7.
it.
But
I
it's
love
it's a
it.
special time. What was your favorite age to coach?
I loved actually every age I loved.
Different.
I probably learned, I thought maybe when my son first started, age 7, 8, 9,
Yeah.
those ages were a great lesson for me to help our coaches. So I have this parenting tool. I'll back up a little bit.
Okay.
My This is the best parenting tool I've ever come up with, and it was a challenge for me to break chains and end cycles and not pass things on to my kids that happened to me as a kid. So I came up with this parenting tool where I judge my kids in the yardsticks of their years and not mine.
Interesting.
Every time I would do that, it gave me patience and perspective. I would see it differently. Like I'm 35 and my son's 5, but he's doing something that doesn't look right from a 35-year-old. But if you put to a 5-year-old, you're like, that's pretty normal. I mean, he's running around with his shoes off. Pretty normal at age 5. Maybe not at 35. I don't see it that way. So it helped me with patience and perspective. So we get into one of our first games and we don't execute. Our defense doesn't do all the things that we had taught all week. And our coaches start losing their minds. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I go, come here. I go, when did you tell James Hinkle, that he needed to do A, B, and C? He goes, we did it on Thursday. We talked before he left practice. Now we're playing this on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, by the time he got home, he forgot about this.
Right.
It's irrelevant to him in his arena. So then I asked my coaches, listen, let's judge them in the yardsticks of their years and not ours. Okay. You got 20 years of experience doing this kid's first game. Okay. There's going to be mistakes. And what that did is, and I started getting our kids to judge us in the yardsticks of our years, not theirs, as they got older. It created this great bridge of communication where we looked at each other with different eyes and we did a good job of listening. And when we executed that, it was just a much better atmosphere. You didn't lose your mind over things that were not worth losing your mind over. And you presented it better, they received it better, and then they applied it easier. And there was real value in learning how transferable that was to the coaching ranks as well as it's been in the business ranks.
Patience and perspective. I'm gonna remember that because you do have to put yourself back into their ages. Your kids are so lucky to have you as a dad, Merril.
Oh, bless you. Well, I'm going to tell them that today. They're actually in St.
They
George, Utah right now. We're supposed
they
to be there.
know it. They know. They
Yeah, well,
know. I
thank
can
you,
tell,
Nadine.
but just the kind of guy you are and everywhere you've been and you don't look like the kind of guy that's going to stop. So what's next for you?
Well, we plow forward. I got a great team. Speaking is my passion.
Yes.
Like I still help the NFL with a program we developed a long time ago, the Way to Play the program. I'm fortunate enough to be with the Steelers and help them with scouting and their personnel evaluations. But if you said, hey, listen, you got to pick one of the three,
Okay.
I will always go speak now. I
Speak.
will take an opportunity to go speak. Now, I don't have to do that, but that's how much I love it. I love just to be able to share a message that is that I'm a product of so many people. I share, and hopefully people can take it and apply to their life any way they see fit if there is something they might be missing on the journey. And that's the value in it, because I learned so much about somebody. I mean, Walter Payton shared stuff with me. Chuck Noll, Aristotle, my kids, my wife. I mean, I could go on and on where I've taken bits and pieces from people and applied them and been better because of it. And being able to share that, hopefully, not everybody's going to say, oh, that helped me or that was inspiring. But there's a few people that were like, I needed that today.
Well, your conversation was extremely inspiring and I needed that today. And I'm just so grateful and honored that we had the time to talk like this. And I appreciate your honesty and transparency.
Absolutely. I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah.
That background's still getting me though. I'm sorry. Geez, I see the sun. It's cold here still.
Well, Arizona welcomes you with open arms. Where can people get more information about you, Merril?
Well,
Where
the
can they
best
follow
place is
you?
just to go to merrillhoge.com,
Yep.
and it's Merrilhoge. I know none of those names are spelled correctly. My ancestors, I can't help that. But that was that I have all my information there, and ways to get a hold of me if you need anything, or any way I could help you.
Well, and you're also on Instagram. Well, thank you, Merril. You're fantastic. And I appreciate you in this beautiful conversation. And I hope to have you back on soon. And you can follow
Absolutely.
us, on Instagram at Nadine Bubeck. We'll see you next time.
Now, with Nadine. Produced at Star Worldwide Networks.